great to be with all of you this evening. My name is Nora Benavides. I work at an organization called PEN America, and this election season, we are bringing programming to people all over the country to empower them to understand what is at stake and how to identify disinformation. And tonight we are joined by a very special partner. I thought that we should introduce him and his organization and allow our colleague Samuel to say just a few words about All Voting is Local.
Thank you so much, Nora, and thank you so much, PEN America, for hosting this great event tonight. My name is Samuel Vilches Santiago, and I'm the Florida campaign manager for All Voting is Local. All Voting is Local is the daughter organization of the Leadership Conference on Human and Civil Rights, and we fight election discrimination and fight to remove discriminatory barriers to the ballot box across the country, and particularly in 8 of the battleground states. As a Florida campaign manager, I lead a lot of our programming efforts in the state of Florida, including our language access work, which this falls under. We're a member of the Respeta Mi Gente Coalition. The Respeta Mi Gente Coalition is a coalition of different organizations, mostly on the C3 side in the Central Florida region, who seek to mobilize and civically engage the Latino community in Central Florida and primarily the Puerto Rican community. We have about 10 organizations, and we do different types of work, from census work to election protection to registering voters, et cetera, et cetera. In this election, across the state and across the country, we've seen how Latinos have been targeted by misinformation and disinformation campaigns. And we think it's very important to have the tools to be able to fight against that and to take a very proactive step into being participants of our democracy. I'm originally Venezuelan, and I came to the United States as a refugee. So I know what it means to fight to protect our democracy. And I also know what disinformation and misinformation looks like in our election system. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation. And I wanted to, again, thank PEN America for hosting this. And we're really excited.
Thank you so much, Samuel. And tonight is a really special evening for us because we at PEN America offer trainings like this all the time. But we sometimes do live translation trainings. And so tonight is a really exciting English and Spanish translation training. So for those that speak primarily Spanish, we hope that you are enjoying this. We are coming to you live this evening, but we will have this training available for those that want to watch afterwards. And part of why we're so excited about this being a live translation event is because when we think about disinformation, we're really only able to give tools to people in English who speak English. And if we're going to walk the walk, if we are going to think about the most vulnerable and targeted voting blocks this election season, some of those include Latino and Spanish-speaking voters. And so we want to meet those voters where they are in speaking Spanish. So we're really thrilled to have our translators here tonight. I just want to give a special thank you to Claudia and Ernest because they are here doing absolutely amazing work. As my phone goes off, I'm so sorry. So we're back to where we were. Let's kick it off by giving everyone just a quick roadmap for this evening. And so we would like to begin by talking about a short background on PEN America's work in this space. And then we will talk through disinformation, misinformation, what is the difference? And then how disinformation actually works. And finally, we will close out our section on responding to disinformation, which means how can we use media literacy to fight back this election season and to help all of you have the tools to identify what misleading content looks like. And we'll close it out with a discussion, a kind of question and answer period for all of you to be able to write in questions, and we will respond in real time. So tonight I will be facilitating along with my colleague Hannah Waltz, who will be here in a little bit joining us, and you'll see her video pop up. We're just really thrilled to have all of you. And a couple of ground rules to be aware of are we are filming live. We will be keeping this recording up for several weeks for people to have access to after the live session. If you have things you want to chat about with other people, we have a chat function. Feel free to use it. But if you have a question that you would like us to answer, put it in the Q&A box and we'll answer it towards the end. So let's get started. I think it's a great place to begin by understanding why we came to this work as an organization. PEN America is actually an organization that was founded by writers to protect the literary arts, to protect the written word. We were founded in the 1920s, right after World War I. And when these writers came together from all over the world, they identified that there were serious threats to free expression and to the open exchange of ideas. In coming together, what they wanted to do was find a way to protect literature, to protect words, knowing that words carry power and that they matter. And so these writers formed various centers, PEN centers, all over the world. PEN America is only one of those centers. And so we have sister chapters in various parts of the world that we work with as well. Of course, we continue to celebrate literature. We have wonderful festivals that recognize literary excellence. And we also, though, work on defending free expression, that element where we worry about how words can be manipulated. And so several years ago, we started examining this trend that we were seeing, where words were being used to manipulate public opinion. I think that you could call it propaganda, and throughout history, people have used that term. We have then heard terms like fake news. And increasingly, we have heard terms like disinformation and misinformation. We've also heard people refer to things as misleading content. All of this, though, is part of one phenomenon, and that is that words are shaping public attitudes, and that the quest for truth is beginning to actually whittle down where people are unaware or unable to sift through information now and know what is credible and what is real. So what we have identified at PEN America are a few key concerns. And so we first examined what this phenomenon was in the wake of the 2016 election here in the United States. And we were really deeply concerned about the way that disinformation, or fake news, as we were calling it back in 2017, the way that that was affecting people's attitudes, the way that public discourse was being diminished. What we have found in the years that have followed is that this trend has continued to cause discord, so that people are moving further and further to various poles of our political ends here in the United States. And that the very fabric of what we might agree on is beginning to break down. So that the things I might feel are no question, those are a given. Hannah, for example, might not feel the same way. And it prevents us from being able to come together and to really have a shared knowledge or a shared basis of what this country is and what our institutions mean. So we've looked at this issue several times at PEN America. And what we have found are a few recurring themes. Of course, we have seen foreign actors infiltrate our social media feeds to incite and to cause discord. Those include Russian actors, Chinese actors, Iranian, and other foreign interference actors. What they do typically is create fake accounts on social media that really promote content that is either wholesale fake and misleading, or it is somehow manipulated to make you feel a certain thing. But we've also seen that these tactics are used by actors here in the United States, and that conspiracy theories, that the kinds of hyper partisan websites that we see pushing out very, very conspiracy like content, almost untethered to reality, are really based here in the United States. We've also seen what we call micro targeting, which is ads with political content created and targeting small segments of our population. So what this really means is that I might see content on my Facebook feed through political ads that is different from what Hannah sees on her social media feed. So if she and I come together and are trying to talk about a given issue, she will come with a set of facts that she believes are facts because of what she's been seeing. And then I'll come to a conversation with that different set of facts that I've been seeing. And we cannot come together to imagine or talk about what the future will look like if we have a completely different set of facts that we are dealing with. And I think that micro-targeting is one of the most insidious and dangerous forms that disinformation can thrive on social media. Now, we're here, of course, because we are about 15 days now from an election. And absolutely, there is election day disinformation. There are examples that we're going to talk about tonight where content might seem credible. You might see something like a notice on your social media feed that your polling location has closed. That might actually just be a disinformation campaign to diminish voter turnout in a certain area. Either way, part of what we want to be able to do is give you the tools to identify that and to think more critically. I would say that in a nutshell, it is us encouraging you to pause, us encouraging you to take a beat and to ask questions. And, throughout all of our research, we have asked one single question, which is this the new normal? Unfortunately, I think we have reached a point where this is absolutely the new normal. And so what we want to do is help train people, everyday online users, voters, educators, other types of influencers, to push back that this is not the new normal and that you have the power to be a stopgap to prevent the spread of disinformation. So I think it's good to talk a little bit about what are the solutions. It sounds kind of doomsday. And one thing that I think we should start with is, as an organization that is grounded in protecting free expression, PEN America has thought long and hard about what solutions look like. And I don't think we can necessarily abdicate all control to social media platforms. What we have to do is find other solutions. Even when platforms like Facebook and Twitter and others try to implement solutions, there are often unintended consequences to those solutions. And a lot of times that means that there can be legitimate speech on those platforms that are removed or censored when those solutions are implemented. So part of what we have found at PEN America is we really need empowered citizens. We need people who are online users, readers, everyday people to learn how to recognize and make sense of what they are seeing online. And what we did was, we were so excited, we launched in early 2020 what is called our Knowing the News program. Our goal was to empower everyday people to help solve this crisis of trust, so that the breakdown in our civic discourse, the kind of doubt that we see in our institutions, could be triaged with everyday people who begin to think more critically and more carefully about what they are seeing online. So of course, when we launched, this was pre-COVID, we thought we would be working all over the country with partners like Samuel, like All Voting is Local, with Respeta Mi Gente. And instead we went virtual, of course, in the middle of COVID. And what we did was try to bring the same kinds of community-centered skills and conversations to people via Zoom. So tonight, of course, as you know, we are here in English. We are here in Spanish. We are trying to meet our audiences where they are. So here's what we're doing this election season. I think it's useful to just know where we are and what we are doing. I think it's important, of course, to educate everyday people like you and me. So we're working with voters, with the people that are actually going to be voting this election season and taking content in. We're working with them doing trainings like this, educating people, empowering them, helping them to ask questions. Do you remember when I said we want you to learn to pause and take a beat? That's what we're helping voters do. We also believe, though, that the way election coverage is centered on headlines, the way that COVID coverage or other news coverage is central to how we think critically and where we turn for information. We are working with journalists and editors all over the country to bring them together with communities. We are hosting conversations. These are town hall-like forums in which we are working with journalists, asking them to talk about the process of how they make news articles. What does it mean to produce an investigative piece of journalism? What do editors do when they weigh what stories to cover and which ones to not cover? How do editors think about the way they craft headlines? In trying to break down the distrust that communities feel towards the news media, we are hoping that in bringing people together to learn how the news gets made, people will begin to have a new appreciation and an understanding of what the news actually looks like and how it gets made. And then finally, we are working with what I call the super spreaders, the really good super spreaders, the people that we turn to in our lives. I'm a voter, of course, but I'm not a journalist or an editor. And who might I turn to? I might turn to my community leaders, my faith leaders, maybe educators like a professor or a librarian or some other trusted source. And so in the lead up to the election, we are working with these different sectors to help people understand the threat of disinformation, how to recognize it, and then hopefully how to be a stopgap to prevent the spread. To give you just a little bit of a taste of why we think this is so concerning now, disinformation is not a new trend, but people are online more than ever. We are online now in the middle of this pandemic, I would say even more than we were before. I have in front of me so many devices. I didn't even script that. I have them everywhere. And so where are we going when we want to find information? Well, part of what Pew Research Center has found is that people go to social media. They don't go to social media, though, as an actual news site. We call it a pathway to news. So over 50% of US adults are going to Facebook as their primary place to get information. 71% then are just using that site generally. But I always ask people, I'm so curious, how many of us use Facebook and aren't actually clicking on articles? I know I can fall prey to this. I can also be guilty of reading through and seeing what Hannah has posted on Facebook. And I don't actually click on anything. I just read the headline and I keep scrolling. And part of what we want to instill here is a sense that we need to diversify and go deeper. Diversify where you get information and go deeper in thinking about how you're consuming information. So I want to see if Hannah is available to kick us off with some of the details of how we get news and information. Hannah, are you with us? I think I'm not sure if she's there, so I'm going to keep going. But let's just go through how we receive news and information. So ask yourself these questions. Where do you get your information from? Is it from news articles? Is it from op-eds? Is it from social media? So my Twitter or Facebook or Instagram? Is it social media that you are going to as the primary place to ingest information? Are you seeing ads and sponsored content? What about radio, talk radio, or television broadcasting? Just begin to think about where you're getting information from. And here we want to just give you a little bit of a breakdown in some of the most basic ways we think of the differences between dis and misinformation. I think it's the simplest thing to understand. And so, of course, here to break it down, we created a fun graphic for you. Disinformation, misleading content, whatever you want to call it, has been around forever. It's really the way things are manipulated to make us feel a certain way. Information that was created with the intent to deceive is disinformation. But misinformation is something else. And that's really information that's just wrong or incorrect. It could be that something started out as disinformation. We're going to talk a lot tonight about the way that information flows, the way disinformation gets created, and then the way it moves online to reach us. And often we become publishers if what we're doing is sharing content that was disinformation. When we do that, though, I don't think I would have the intent to deceive or mislead people. And so I would say that I am sharing misinformation. And even though there is a distinction to know about, it's all bad. It's all horrible. And we want to avoid that. Here are a few more specific types of content that we want you to begin thinking about. One is fake news sites. These are sometimes called pink slime sites. They are news websites that masquerade as credible news. Outlets that seem legitimate. They could maybe have a masthead at the top of their website that looks real. They could have the weather forecast for the neighborhood that they purport to be covering. And yet, if you dig just a little tiny bit under the surface, you will see that these are actually not credible news sources. And you will not be able to find much in the way of investigative reporting, information about the news outlets' policies, a number of kind of dead ends. There's also what I think is one of the most prevalent ways that we get misleading content, and that is on social media. Maybe it's private groups. It could also just be in your news feeds, the way that people share information. Remember, if disinformation is shared with the intent to deceive, misinformation is not. Maybe if I share something not meaning to deceive anyone and it becomes misinformation, you receive that then on your news feed after I share it. So begin thinking about, how are you consuming information on your social media feeds? Are you in a lot of private groups? Is that where you're getting your information this election season? If you are, that is okay. It's just good to know. Good to conduct a digital scan. One of the third categories of misleading content is what we call coordinated inauthentic behavior. Those are the fake accounts, the trolls, the bots, whatever else you want to call these. Either they are real people masquerading in some troll farm, producing content, producing engagement on social media posts, and that's only intended to drive emotion and traffic to certain content. There also might be bots, which are computer generated and run accounts that masquerade as real. And then, of course, the fake profiles that we've seen, where I've seen this on the rise lately. People are saying, oh, I have a fake imposter acting like me, don't friend them. And so in the lead up to the election, it's a small piece, but sometimes I try to recommend, if you're getting friend requests from people you're already friends with, just pause and ask yourself, and maybe send a message to your friend that you're already friends with and say, I got this request. Is this really you? Because some people have multiple accounts, but sometimes it can be a fake account. And then finally, I would say the fourth type of misleading content to be aware of is not whole stop fake, but highly partisan or biased sites that push out conspiracy theory-like content, untethered from reality, not tied to science or data or investigation, that maybe lacks any kind of critical reporting. And so we want you to be aware of those, asking yourself, is that how I am taking in information, going to those types of sites? So let's give you an example of actually how disinformation works. I want it to be concrete. I think that so often disinformation can feel like an abstract concept. We see headlines that talk about disinformation. Today I saw a headline talking about the hurricane of disinformation, but I think it can feel like it doesn't really affect us. And so what I want to do is show you just a little bit of what was in 2016 one of the most engaged posts about the election. So let's start with the way an article, piece of content, is thought of. An article is conceived by an unidentified person. That article in question was a headline that said that the Pope endorsed Donald Trump for president. The article was written up, the headline was crafted. The article was then published on a news website. It was one of those fake news websites. When you dig a little deeper, it's a dead end, and it's not a credible or legitimate news outlet. That website is part of dozens of other fake news websites. And together, they published hundreds of pieces of content that were all misleading. But what's interesting is this story was not completely fake. In fact, in 2016, the Pope was interviewed, and he was interviewed about the two primary presidential candidates at the time. Those were Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And in being interviewed, he was asked about something totally different. He was asked about how likely it would be that Hillary Clinton's emails were unearthed. And as he was talking, he mentioned the names of the different candidates, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And so the article then, in being conceived of, was actually based on this real interview with the Pope. But what happened was these bad actors cut and spliced that interview to create a headline that said the Pope endorsed Donald Trump for president. He didn't ever say anything about endorsing a candidate. But there was this kernel of truth to the article because there was a real interview with the Pope. And so once it was created, then what happened? Then the article was shared on Facebook by someone working for the network of these fake websites. Once it was out in the ether, out on Facebook, on social media, what happened? More people picked it up. But first it was amplified by those people connected to the network of those fake websites. And so in amplifying and sharing it, it started to get engagement. And then other people picked up the story that were not related, connected, or even knowledgeable of this network of fake news websites. And so these other people, everyday people, picked up the story, saw that it was getting a lot of traffic, and people started sharing it. But people who shared it were supporters of Trump, then people shared it who were supporters of Hillary Clinton. Everyone was sharing this post. It got over 1 million engagements on social media. And at the time, in 2016, it was really considered one of the most engaged with posts about the election. And I think one of the reasons it's a powerful example tonight is because it shows us that, yes, there were bad actors. Yes, someone thought of this and wanted to deceive. But once it went on social media, people who had no ill intent started sharing it. So if you remember how we started the training tonight, I highlighted that everyone can have the power and the responsibility to think about what you share and to stop from sharing disinformation. So why are we actually susceptible to this? I think it's worth us talking about it. And, the reasons are not always easy to define, but I think it starts with our emotions. Let's take the example that we just talked about. The way that an emotion might spark something in us when we see a headline that the Pope endorsed Donald Trump for president in 2016. Or think of any number of headlines that get your heart racing. Maybe you feel anxious or angry or excited or shocked, any number of things. When your emotions are the primary driver of how you're acting, you're not thinking critically, you're not taking a beat, you're probably wanting to share things. And I say that from personal experience because I know that feeling when you're on your phone and you see something emotional. And what do you want to do? I want to share it immediately because I want to be able to get in on the action and be part of the conversation. The other thing that happens, though, is that I think there's sort of a weird element that goes on that things usually don't look completely fake. We don't all fall for completely fake information. We're smarter than that. And so part of what happens is that disinformation often has a patina of credibility. It feels kind of real. And whether it is a news article or an image or a video, whatever, a documentary, a lot of times it'll feel credible, which enhances our wanting to share that. It enhances the feeling, whatever it is, that we have when we see it. But then there's also something else that happens, and that is kind of that feeling like you don't want to miss out on the action. Because a lot of times, coordinated, inauthentic behavior will help boost engagement on content, especially on disinformation. So things like bots, those computer generated accounts that might like or comment or share a piece of misleading content will cause us to have more of an emotional reaction. And then there is this thing called the illusory truth effect, which kicks in even when we see things that might not be real, or even the things that we know to be false. The illusory truth effect is like a brain shortcut. It's this little thing that once we've seen a piece of content and we see it a second time, we are more likely to believe it is real and credible the second time. Every time we see content, it seems more plausible. So if you're seeing a lot of people sharing something, it could mean that you're emotional, you want to get in on the action, that everyone is sharing it, it feels real, you're not being duped, of course, you want to get in on it, and maybe even it confirms your own bias. And so when that happens, what happens then? You want to share it, you want to partake in being a creator of content. And when that happens, I would say, remember this training. Not only do you want to remember this training, but remember that thing that we recommended at the beginning. Pause and take a beat. Ask yourself why you are seeing this. But let's talk about sort of, I think, some of the specifics. What does this really mean right now? Everyone asks me about what election disinformation looks like. I get that question a lot. What are examples? And what I try to explain is I do not think that election disinformation is the only misleading content that we are going to see this election season. We have now been facing a pandemic and an infodemic for months. Content that is misleading about science and public health, that is invading our social media feeds. This summer, in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, we also saw protest-related disinformation, bad actors infiltrating both online and offline to stoke violence and discord. And of course, we are already seeing election-related mis and disinformation. So what does that look like? Well, here are a few examples. One, I want to talk about the stuff that's hard to debunk. That's the stuff that you will fall prey to. So let's start with something that our colleagues at First Draft have heard about, that on Facebook channels, private Facebook groups, people have started saying that ballots, mail-in ballots, are color-coded to out voters and their party affiliation. What's hard to debunk about this? Well, we don't know everything in all Facebook private groups. We only see what I call the tip of the iceberg, what we know about from people reporting to us. And so if I'm getting information about what's actually happening in some Facebook groups, like the claim that mail-in ballots are color-coded to out voters and their party affiliation, I may not actually be getting reports about what other private groups are saying. So the mis or disinformation that I can help debunk is only a small piece of what's out there. Here's the other thing that's hard with this example, though. That is that ballots are color-coded very specifically by county. And every county, every local election board has a different process for how they tabulate votes. And the colors correspond to those local counties. So they help with not outing party affiliation, but in helping people understand that something is a mail-in ballot. But if I live in California and the post on Facebook was someone from Colorado, I don't know what their color coding claim means for my California color ballot. And it becomes a problem when people don't think critically about that claim. But instead, what do? It plays on their emotions. It feels real because I don't know about you, but I kind of wonder, I have a mail-in ballot right now and it's black. What does that mean? Because I've seen other ballots that are purple or blue and red, or red mostly with a little bit of black. It seems credible. All of the ways that we're susceptible to mis and disinformation are exhibited right here in this story. But it gets even worse. So here on the, I guess, our right is an image of what looked to be mail-in ballots that were thrown in a dumpster in California. This news really peaked and was trending a few weeks ago. And it's a hard one to debunk, but I always want to include it because I think it helps show us how much homework we actually have to do when we are consuming information. So let's start from the beginning. Are these real ballots? Not quite. These are envelopes that contained mail-in ballots. But is this a real image? Yes. This is a real photograph of these envelopes in a dumpster in California, which is not a good look. But here's what we want to know, and here's how we can debunk it. By California state law, local election officials cannot get rid of mail-in ballot envelopes for a designated period. And so they had to keep these ballots. These are the envelopes to mail-in ballots from the 2018 midterm election. But I don't know about you, but every way that we are susceptible to disinformation, I felt all of those things, and we can see those elements exhibited in this story. So there are ways that it plays on your emotions. If I saw this, what did I first think? I thought, the system must be broken. The system is flawed and corrupt. It is throwing out my mail-in ballot. Thousands of mail-in ballots are being trashed. That is not good. And it makes me anxious and angry and afraid It even then makes me question if the election and the electoral process works, which is frankly what disinformation campaigns are attempting to do. They are attempting to do this across many categories to target Black voters, to target Spanish language voters, immigrant voters, those that might be most susceptible to digesting and believing these things. And so that means we are all the more, it is incumbent upon us to take seriously how information reaches us, to make sure that we do not fall prey to those campaigns. So it's hard because it plays on our emotions. I think it's also hard because these are real images. They're not manipulated. So it has that patina of credibility. It also then was engaged with a lot. And whoever took this image and these photos and then spread them did so seemingly to discredit the electoral process, to sow doubt in our election. I think that that can do a number of things. It can prevent people from turning out. It can make people question if their vote counts. It can make people feel like maybe they should sit this election season out. And so the urgency of why we need to push back on disinformation is important all of the time. It was important when we saw information that tried to tell people that drinking bleach will cure you of coronavirus. That literally can kill people. Here, when our democracy is being predicated on the information we see and the way that it plays on our sense of trust, everything is on the line. So that's part of why we're doing these trainings all the time. One of the groups that we are actually very concerned about is what we call the emerging electorate. Those people that have never voted before or are new voters, young voters, between the ages of 18 and 24. Many times people say that dis and misinformation affect older adults the most. And frankly, misinformation targets all of us. So, just to give you a sense of why we try to work with young people, especially this season, is because we've seen something very interesting. Before the pandemic, many emerging electorate voters, those people between the ages of 18 and 24, were not interested in voting in 2020. But then the pandemic happened, and we saw the protests this summer, and now we have seen a rise, and over 70% of students say that they are absolutely certain they will vote in the 2020 election. So we are trying to work with groups like All Voting is Local, Respeta Mi Gente, other groups like New Georgia Project, Voto Latino, and others all over the country to try to help give tools to young people so that they can make sense of what they are seeing. We are also, though, not just working with young voters. We are working with Black voters. We are working with Latino and Spanish-speaking voters, Asian voters, Jewish voters, a wide range of voters that are the most targeted with disinformation. And what are we up against? Well, what we've done is Penn has tried to put together recommendations for what all of us can expect this election season. So one, let's start with the voting process itself, the way that all of us are engaged. I think that one thing we need to be prepared for is that voting is going to take more time and thought than usual. We are going to have a higher number of people mailing in their ballot. Maybe it is because of health reasons. Maybe it is something else because they are not living in the state in which they vote. Whatever the reason, mail-in ballots will be higher, which means there will be a counting process for for election officials to actually count those ballots. However you determine you want to vote, know that it is going to probably take longer. Not just time, but more thought. So I'll be honest, this election season is going to be my first time voting in New York. I used to live in Georgia, and I worked in Georgia, and I voted in Georgia every year. And this year, knowing that I was going to have to newly register in New York, I thought a lot about how long would it take to register. The deadline that passed was October 9th. There is also then a recommended time in which you should send in your ballot if you want to mail it in, which means I had to ask myself, how do I want to vote? Do I feel safe and confident voting in person? Do I want to vote on election day? Or do I maybe want to do in-person early voting? So what I have done is come up with a personal plan. I am going to be voting in person, but early. And New York has an early voting period that starts on October 24th, which I will be doing. I already researched where my early voting location is. This type of process is something we encourage everyone to do because the time will take longer. And you want to think through, how am I doing it this year? It will look a little different because we are dealing with an unprecedented election. The next thing that we encourage is expect to fact check everything you hear. And I mean everything. If my mom or dad or sibling or best friend or my dog shares information online, I am going to fact check it. If someone texts me a link to some article, I'm going to fact check it. If I have a faith leader and they say something or include something in a weekly newsletter and it really plays on my emotions and I love it, I'm still going to fact check it. We want you to get in the habit of fact checking everything this season, including from the people you trust. And it isn't because we think you need to be skeptical or critical or not believe things. It is because all of us can fall prey to sharing misinformation. I have shared it, my boss has shared it, my friends have shared it. And so we're all human. And we want you to feel like you're in the habit of knowing how to fact check things. What else do we want people to expect? The third thing is, we want you to expect the way reporting is going to happen. Because this year, I think that the media's reporting on results is going to look a little different from usual. We have just partnered with the Associated Press on a fun, short video that explains the process of how votes get tabulated and what the Associated Press's role is in calling those elections. How does that happen? So we want you to go to pen.org and we will send this video when we are done with the training tonight, but we want you to check out all of those videos that we're creating. We're doing it for you. And we want to make it easy for you to learn about what to expect. The fourth thing is expect delays across the board. I have heard that nearly half of Americans expect us to hear the results in our presidential election within 3 days of the election. But experts often are now encouraging us to not expect results at least for a week, maybe longer. In that period, I know I will be anxious. I think all of us will. No matter what side of the political aisle you are on, the idea that we are waiting for election results is stressful. And so we want people to feel like they can anticipate those delays and that those delays do not necessarily mean that the system or our electoral process is flawed. It is not corrupt. It is not rigged. It might actually mean that election officials are doing their job. And so while you are waiting, what we are encouraging people to do is to know that patience is patriotic, that truth takes time, that we want you to pause. If it means going off of social media, great. Just do your homework and expect these delays. And then the final thing is expect the unexpected. You need to be ready for who knows what. I didn't anticipate COVID this year. I don't know who did. I then did not anticipate such long and sustained civil unrest. Whatever it is that we are going to face, we need to be ready and nimble to expect the unexpected. So what can we do? Well, I'm looking at time and we are approaching the final section of our presentation this evening. This is the section on the solution itself. Now, all of what has come before is content that can help you to understand what you're seeing, but to lead us through what we call our media literacy toolkit, I want to see if Hannah is here. Hannah, will you take us through?
Sure can. Hi, everyone. It's great to come in on this media literacy toolkit part. A lot of what we say we like to do to prep people is to be proactive. And these are some things that you can do to be proactive in this age of disinformation. So step one, we always tell people to take control of your digital experience. So this is really about being present with the ways in which you consume media. So know where and what you're consuming. I always like to just take a couple minutes during this part and just really think about, like, where have you gotten your news today? Did it take you to a link out somewhere else that wasn't a news site? Maybe you didn't realize that. Maybe you did realize it. It's just good to stay present and remember where you're getting your information. Okay, step two. This one, we always say, just take a step back, and in a similar way that you're conducting a scan of where you get your information, conduct a scan of your reactions to the things that you see online. So, disinformation, it really thrives on your reaction and your engagement to things. So if you're seeing something that has a bunch of exclamation points, or if you find yourself being angry at something that you have just read, this is a prime opportunity to take a step back and think, why do I feel this way? Maybe I am being, shoved along to consume this information in a certain way, and this is a good reason to take a step back and just kind of think about what the agenda might be there. Okay, so step three, understand what you're seeing. This is another really good opportunity to, back to the scanning, to take a look at the pages. So if you are scanning through a news article, check and see it at the top if there's a label that distinguishes it between news and opinion. Credible news sources will be really transparent about this. They will put a little opinion tag at the top if it's opinion. Another way that you can do this is you can check out the About page. We really encourage you to diversify your news sources where you get your information, but sometimes that might mean coming upon it could be a very credible news source, but maybe you've never heard of it. So it's a good opportunity to go to the About page, check it out, see if it's credible, Google it, and consider that type of content. Next one is do some research. So this goes back to kind of what I was just saying about the About pages. Check the credibility. Sometimes what Nora was talking about earlier with pink slime websites, these can be really kind of vulnerable spots, but that's why we're giving you these tools to be proactive and know that these could be things that you're encountering. So do some research on the type of source that you're looking at. And, as it says here, just, check to see if it's something that others have been quoting. Other credible news sources are really good ways of really good resources to check and see if they've been working together, to see if there's an About Us page, as I mentioned before. And just a simple Google will also help you with that. Okay, and this is one of my favorite, most proactive steps. So verify before you share and fact check. We're going to provide you with a large list of fact-checking resources in our follow-up email. But before we do that, I want to kind of go through a couple of other ways that we can fact check what we're reading or consuming online. So if you want to verify images or videos, you can use a couple of different options for reverse image searches. I have a Chrome extension. It's called RevEye, Reverse Eye Image Search. And it's really easy. It's a free extension. You just right click. Once you've downloaded it, you'll just right click on an image that you might wonder about the source or wonder if there's something fishy about it. And you'll say like search with RevEye, and it'll take you directly to an external search in the search engine of your choosing, Google or whatever. And it'll just come up like a regular Google search. So that's a really good place to start. Other fact-checking resources you can use. I think on the next slide, we have a list of trustworthy fact-checking resources. We also encourage you to, kind of keep an eye out for certain things that can be red flags and certain types of like fake accounts. For example, here we see a tweet from Rashida Tlaib, or who you might think is being Rashida Tlaib, but it's actually a fake account. And these are the kinds of minutia of little details that you can keep an eye out for if you are feeling a little sketchy about something. So in this one, you'll notice that there is not a verified check mark. So that's always a good thing to think of. That's kind of second nature for us now. But also think about the kind of smaller details that could be loopholes for bad actors trying to spread disinformation. So in this one, for example, they have swapped a lowercase l or a uppercase I out so that they could make it look like Tlaib, but it's actually spelled incorrectly. But that is a loophole that bad actors can use for fake accounts. You can also kind of take a look out to see when did they join Twitter or when did they join Facebook. These are good ways to check and see if this could be a fake account. And these are the trusty fact-checking resources that I was just mentioning. And in the same way that we say diversify your news sources, we also want to say diversify your fact-checking resources. Sometimes people will ask, how do I know that these fact-checking resources are credible? Well, you can, of course, do your research in the same way. These are all these fact-checking resources that we've provided here are all credible and highly respected, but we encourage you to take control of not just your news consumption, but also your fact-checking resource usage. But these are some good ones to start with. And each fact-checking website or resource is going to have their own way of judging credibility and kind of grading them, if you will. So this is just a good way to see, PolitiFact uses Pants on Fire and like lots of good visuals to show you how false or true a statement is. You'll see words like debunked or like big X's. This is another good reminder for if it's something that you feel is you're a little skeptical about it. You can always Google a phrase or whatever, like ballots and trash, for example, and then put that in quotes and then put hoax or fake into your search engine. And it will come up if it's been fact checked by or debunked by a fact checking resource like PolitiFact or Snopes, etc. The Pinocchio is another good way of the grading scale that the Washington Post fact checker uses. So I think I'm going to turn it back over to Nora to talk about what voters can do this season.
Thanks, Hannah. So, we're kind of rounding out the section on everything that we present. And what we felt is necessary is to, help you feel not just prepared about what to expect, but then what can you actually do proactively? Of course, we say the first one is learn about the threat of disinformation and the way that it poses a threat in this election cycle. But if you are doing that, you're already here. You're already in this training. And so congratulations. This is fantastic. What else can you do? Well, we also suggest that you identify trusted voices in your community. Of course, we still say that you need to fact check them, but identify those local journalists. Identify who your local election officials are. Identify them now so that come November 2nd, November 3rd, November 4th, November 5th, you know where to turn and how to research who is putting out credible content. And then once you have those trusted voices, I say be a trusted voice. Be a resource for other people. And on election day, know what to expect. Tell everyone that we should expect delays, that delays are not bad, that it is actually the process working probably. So knowing that it can be hard, right? How am I a resource? Well, we want to help you be a resource. So we have made tons of things for you. One, we have made a series of public awareness guides or tip sheets, as we call them at PEN America, to help all of you understand different aspects of the election season and how to identify dis and misinformation. So we have a guide, for example, on how to talk to friends and family who share misinformation. That is one of the most common questions we get right now. And we want you to feel like you know how to respond to people. Should you post publicly on their post, telling them that you disagree or letting them know that something is false? Usually we do not encourage people to engage with misinformation. All that does is increase engagement and interest or visibility to a post. So if my friend shares misinformation, I'm probably going to send him or her a private message. And I'm going to try to do it with empathy. I'm not going to say, I can't believe you did that. I'm going to say, hey, I saw what you posted earlier. I started doing some research. I think it's probably false or misleading. Here's what I found out. I have also sometimes shared misinformation, and it's so embarrassing. And so what we always tell people, bring your humanity to the conversation. We also give people tools, like I laid out the 5 things to expect this election season. We have all of that for you in one of our tip sheets. We also have a tip sheet on how to spot and use media literacy to identify COVID-related disinformation. So all of these are tools that you will receive after the workshop. We also produced a really fun public service announcement with some of our favorite celebrities and writers that are PEN America colleagues of ours. And we call it the Spot It, Check It, Stop It video. If you can spot misinformation, check it and make sure it is misinformation, and then stop it from spreading. So we give you tips on how to do that. We also launched, and I'm so proud because we are crafting real questions every day for you with an interactive media literacy quiz for you to test your knowledge of what to expect this election season. And then finally, we are working on social media. And so we are about to launch, we're in the middle of launching, I'm so sorry, an Instagram campaign to reach our emerging electorate. We are giving people information in fun, bite-sized videos about what to expect as we wait for election results, what to expect and what the difference is between disinformation and misinformation and more. So we encourage you to check all of that out. We are now rounding out our section of tonight. And again, we want to open it up for questions. So in the Q&A function, if you do have a question, please type it in. We have about 20 minutes until we have to close out. I will just say a few final remarks. One, stay in touch with us. I am always on Twitter. PEN America is always on Twitter. Ask us questions there if you have them. Also, when we end today, you will be asked to fill out a post-workshop survey. These are anonymous results, but they actually help us in shaping the way we do these trainings. So I hope that you'll fill it out. And then finally, all of the resources that we have shared tonight, we will be providing in an email after the training is over. So I know Hannah is here. We're going to try to answer questions together. Please ask questions in the Q&A function. All right, so let's see. I have a question from someone who says, if I only speak up privately, won't other people think I believe the mis or disinformation? I think that this is a question in response to how do I talk to friends and family who share misinformation? And generally our recommendation is don't feed the trolls. Don't give them more reasons for the algorithms to boost engagement on a post. And so that's part of why we always encourage people to pause and think about whether they post publicly or not. My reaction when I see this question is, I don't think other people will think that you believe the mis or disinformation. I honestly think most people will just digest whatever they're seeing. And what you can do, if you do feel like you want to post publicly on someone's post, is do it with empathy, do it carefully, and share credible resources. If you have done your homework and fact-checked something that someone else has shared, you know it is misleading, share with them how you did that. This can be a learning opportunity for other people. And if they don't know fact-checking websites, if they're not in the habit of doing this, this is a great moment for you to help them. But a lot of times people are not going to read all of the comments on a post. If Hannah posts misinformation and I see her post and that it has been liked 50 times and 13 comments, I'm probably not, as most people do not, read all of the comments before I digest what she shared. What will I do instead? I'll probably read the headline of whatever she shared, and then I'll believe it. And that's part of why we try to get everyone like you in the habit of pausing and saying, well, wait, why did Hannah share that? Why do I feel emotional now? If you're doing your homework, help her do her homework. I don't think that other people will then assume that if Nora didn't comment, she just fell victim to this. Most of us are too self-involved for that. And so I actually think that it's best for you to weigh, should I comment publicly and help my friend that way, if I do it kindly, or should I share something privately? Sometimes we say that if someone has shared information privately, that can help someone else remove the post. In fact, when you comment, though, as someone that sees that this is mis or disinformation, yes, the person who posted it will know. And if other people are inclined to read all of the comments, then they will. But the best thing is to try to help people adapt their practices. And you don't want them to clam up. So it's part of why we really want you to be empowered to decide how you do it. If you want to comment, do so. Give them the tools then to learn how they can fact check things as well. Hannah, I see you nodding as well. We get this question all the time. All right.
Yeah, I think I would just add or just underline the point of empathy. I think this is like a really hard time, especially right now for everyone. It's the last thing you want to do to shame somebody, and just remember to see yourself in them as well. We all fall prey to it. The psychological effects of disinformation that Nora talked about earlier, these are going to be at play. There's a reason it works. But if we, kind of allow ourselves, without sounding too corny, if we allow ourselves to open up to it a little bit, not to disinformation, but open up to others and come at it with an empathetic approach, I think it's just going to make everybody a little bit more willing to seek the truth and defend it.
Okay, there's another question here. Someone says, do you have specific tips for helping others, parents mainly, who are not native speakers of English and are already at a deficit when it comes to being able to evaluate and root out misinformation? I am thinking mainly of older folks who get their news from Facebook or WeChat, etc. I think that is an excellent question, first of all. And part of why we try to do trainings in English and in Spanish is because we know that it's not a solution for everything, but there is less information out there for non-English speakers. There are less tools in Spanish. And we know that right now, in 15 days, everyone will be voting. Spanish-speaking voters are one example, just one, of a community group targeted with misinformation. So we want to give you tools, whether it is you yourself, or maybe it's tools that you share with a family member. So part of what we are doing also is trying to identify what those tools and tips should be. But they can't just be from us. So we have a few recommendations. One is we have been working with a wonderful news outlet called Documented, which works with immigrant communities to give them news in a variety of languages and to help people understand some of the principles of how to identify misinformation on WhatsApp groups. A lot of non-English speaking groups will communicate in those group chat-like situations and not recognize or know how to spot misinformation on those platforms. So I would encourage you to check out the trainings that Documented has done for immigrant and non-English speaking individuals. I also think that the tips, though, that I would recommend are the same for everyone. The tips are always to do your homework and to try to bring those family members, if it's your parents or your friends. If you are here tonight, you are in a position to be a credible source for your family members or for the people that you are asking this question on behalf of. So think about the tools, share the tools. Our tip sheet on how to talk to friends and family who share misinformation is also available in Spanish, and we will be releasing more of our tools in Spanish for others. There are other languages, of course, Russian, Chinese, Korean, Arabic, And we do have a translation option on our website. And so if you want to do an easy but not perfect translation, check out that feature on pen.org, and all of our content will be translated into another language. I think we have over 40 languages. So we're trying to do what we can, but it isn't perfect. And so part of that is also talking about why it's important that we have tools and tools in different languages for people like the question you ask. Because we want these trainings, we want these types of fun, interactive tools to be available to everyone. It truly is all hands on deck. We all need to play a role. So I want to make sure Hannah can weigh in as well. I really think that this is a great question, but I also think it's the same stuff we would say anyway. And we got a lovely question, a lovely comment from someone all the way from Rome, Italy, which is great. Just saying thank you so much. We don't have any more live questions. So we have 10 minutes left. I am so happy to end early and to close us out. To close us out, though, I would like to first thank, oh, I have one more question in the chat, I realize, right? It was a false alarm. Okay, here is a question in our chat. What about people who don't believe the fact-checking website? They think the media is too biased and won't tell the truth. That is a great question. And some of that question is answered in our tip sheet on how to talk to friends and family. Hannah says it best, I think, actually, that you have to know when to have an exit strategy. Hannah, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Sure, I'm happy to. Yeah, I think, first and foremost, come at it with a solution in mind. Come at it with something in mind to bring to the table empathetically, but then also know when you're not going to make any difference in a positive way. And by that, I mean, there are some times when confrontation can lead to a kind of backpedaling effect that's counterproductive, and we don't want to do that. We always want to be encouraging conversation and knowing that sometimes one conversation isn't going to do it. Unfortunately, we're going to have to come back and continue to, fight for those credible news sources, fight for the truth. I think that it's very helpful also to remember that it's, healthy to be skeptical, but sometimes that, skeptical nature can lead us into a kind of a tornado of doubt. And I think what we really want to be doing is continuing to just elevate the facts as opposed to allowing ourselves to get lost in a bad conversation tunnel. I don't know if that's a great metaphor, but I think that's probably the right thing in terms of the exit strategy that Nora was mentioning.
I see one more question in the chat, so I figured I would go ahead and start answering it, but it's for both of us, Hannah, so you have to help me. This is, how do you maintain your enthusiasm and passion? There's so much ridiculous information out there that apparently intelligent people believe. I've just given up. How do you keep fighting? Well, I think I have good days and bad days, and good hours and bad hours. And sometimes I fall prey and believe bad content. I talk about this all the time with Hannah and my other colleagues at PEN America. One of my colleagues kindly suggested that I was wrong several months ago when I shared some evocative image. I think that we need to hold space for the moments when we are really tired and sick of it. And right now, I think a lot of us feel that way. But we also have to have networks of people that lift us up. So usually if I'm down, Hannah's not down. But if Hannah's down, I might not be down. And trying to build those networks is one of, I think, the best ways to troubleshoot. The other thing is, I don't think we should always feel like we have to have enthusiasm and passion. I sometimes do, and I love our tip sheets, and I'm so proud of our interactive quiz. Hannah and I work every day on drafting questions for you guys. So if there is one thing I'm enthusiastic about, it is you taking the quiz. But there are some days that I'm not passionate. And Hannah, I want to hear your thoughts as well, but it really depends. And there's nothing else to do other than keep going.
Yeah, I think I would just second most of all of that and just say, it really helps to know that, yes, not only are my coworkers behind it, but there's also a ton of other organizations that are doing very, that have missions very closely aligned to ours. And we're all working towards a common goal. And that feels good to get caught up in that current of mission driven work. I think it's also really important to remember that this change is slow. It's really I have to remind myself that we might not see, for something that we thought about a lot during the creating the how to talk to friends and family tip sheet was, how do we encourage people to do this? Because it can kind of mimic what this questionnaire was saying. How do we continue to think that we're going to make change in this way? And I think honestly, it kind of calls back to the something similar to the illusory truth effect that we were talking about earlier. This is on the flip side, the illusory false effect, I guess, for somebody who would think that you weren't quite on the right side of things. But if you continue to have these conversations, you might just etch away a little bit each time at being able to convince folks that you're having these conversations with. And I think that being able to hold on to those little things, those little conversations, each time you're able to do that, you'll gather a little bit more strength and they might come around. And I think that's a good important thing to hold on to. And I try to do that.
I think all of that is right. And unfortunately, I think social media has allowed us to remain in echo chambers, to feel like everything we see is everything that exists. And it is good, even if it is jarring, to know that there are different perspectives. And it can be painful, though, to try to encounter and confront those perspectives. There is also so much hate online and so much vitriol. And I think we need to acknowledge that and acknowledge how exhausting it can be to be a person online, which is to be a person now. We're always online. And, there are days where I try to limit being on Twitter. And sometimes I feel better when I'm not. There are also times that I try to just say, I have to take it with a grain of salt. I have to just do a tiny little bit of it. But acknowledging that there exists this big, big mass of hate online and that it can be hard to win everyone over. We're not going to do it all in one day. We're going to do a little tiny bit today and maybe a little tiny bit tomorrow. And if one person from this training thinks a little more critically and doesn't share a misleading article, I will be very excited. I am so excited at the idea that one of you, maybe even two of you, I hope that's not too ambitious, that two of you will now think carefully and not share a piece of misinformation. And if that happens slowly, if all of us do that, it grows and grows, and it is a kind of movement. So there are days to feel absolutely exhausted, and I do not like ignoring those feelings. But there are also ways to try to feel excited about the good work, as Hannah said, the kind of camaraderie of people in this together. So with that, I want to close us out for real now. And first, I want to thank our partners, Respeta Mi Gente and All Voting is Local. Samuel, you have been a wonderful partner in this. Of course, I want to thank our interpreters who are so amazing. Ernest and Claudia, we are going to keep having you do this. And then I just want to thank all of you. In the lead up to the election, there are a lot of things you could do with your time. You could make some food, you could eat some cookies, you could watch a really great show. I just finished one. You could walk your dog, you could sleep, and you decided to attend this training. So thank you for joining us. This is going to be featured on our YouTube, and we're going to keep pushing fun content out, or at least good content. And then Hannah, as always, she is my partner in crime. So thank you for everything. We are thrilled to answer questions. We will follow this up with our email of resources for you. And please fill out our survey when this ends. Thank you so much.